The gate agent barely made eye contact. "Sir, we're going to need you to switch seats." Leonard Walker had paid extra for that aisle seat because of his bad leg. He didn't complain, just got up and moved. But 3 rows back, someone noticed. And by the time the plane landed, the president of the airline was already waiting. Welcome to Legendary Stories. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Leonard Walker didn't look like much. 81, corduroy jacket, shoes shined the old-fashioned way. One hand always rested on the handle of his cane, even when he wasn't moving. But if you looked closer, you'd notice the details. A faint limp in his left leg, a tiny pin on his lapel, Army infantry, worn but polished, and a folded envelope poking out of his jacket pocket marked Fort Jackson Graduation Ceremony. He wasn't flying for business. He wasn't on vacation. He was headed to Columbia, South Carolina. His great-granddaughter Ellie was finishing basic training, the first one in the family to follow him into uniform since Vietnam. She'd written him every Sunday, told him he was the reason she didn't quit, and when she asked if he'd come to her graduation, Leonard didn't hesitate. He cashed out a savings bond, booked the ticket himself, paid extra for seat 10C, aisle, premium economy, more legroom. His left knee hadn't worked right in years, but he could handle the flight as long as he had that seat. He arrived early, didn't ask for assistance, just stood quietly in line, nodded to the gate agent, and took his time down the jet bridge. It was only when he sat down, carefully with a small sigh of relief, that the trouble began. A man in a vest leaned over from the galley, clipboard in hand, in a hurry. "Sir, are you Leonard Walker?" Leonard nodded. "That's right." The man cleared his throat. "We've got a family of 5 who booked last minute. The only block of seats available is where you're sitting. We'd like to move you to a different row to help them stay together." Leonard blinked. "I paid for this seat ahead of time, for medical reasons." "I understand, but it's a tight flight. We're asking for your cooperation." The man was already motioning down the aisle, and somewhere behind him, a woman with 3 children stood waiting. Leonard adjusted his hat and slowly, quietly stood up. He didn't know that someone 2 rows behind had already started filming. Seat 26B, middle seat, near the back, right beside the bathroom. Leonard lowered himself slowly, clutching the headrest for balance. His cane barely fit under the seat in front of him. His knees didn't either. To his right, a teenager in a hoodie was already nodding off against the window. To his left, a man in a blazer had earbuds in and a laptop open, typing fast, elbows wide. Leonard didn't say a word. He folded his hands over his stomach and stared at the seatback screen that wasn't working. His leg throbbed almost immediately. There was no space to shift, no aisle to stretch into, and no one seemed to notice. The family that took his seat never looked back. Not once. The attendants moved up and down the aisle, passing him like he wasn't there. Not a thank you, not an apology, not even a glance. Leonard had been uncomfortable before. Years of road marches, barracks bunks, VA waiting rooms. But this was different. This wasn't pain. It was something quieter, something colder. He'd been told, without words, that his comfort didn't matter, that his service didn't count anymore, that he was an easy sacrifice for someone else's convenience. 2 rows behind, Jillian Tran sat in 28D. She'd seen the whole thing, the quiet way he stood up, the cane, the discomfort. She worked in corporate operations, flew twice a week, and the look on that old man's face wasn't one she could ignore. Jillian pulled out her phone. She didn't start recording. She started writing. Passenger Leonard Walker was removed from his pre-booked aisle seat despite medical need. Seated in 26B, cabin crew unresponsive. Suggest immediate review. Flight 408, Cleveland to Columbia. She didn't know who'd read it, but she sent it anyway. Leonard shifted again in his seat, still silent, still steady. But something in his posture had changed. Not anger, just disappointment. The kind that doesn't show in words, only in the way a man stops meeting your eyes. The cabin lights dimmed. Engines hummed to life. and the captain's voice crackled through the speakers. Leonard barely heard it. His leg had gone stiff. He tried shifting his weight just enough to ease the pressure, but there was nowhere to go. The space between his knee and the seat in front of him was less than 2 inches. The man to his left spilled into his space without noticing. The teenager on the right leaned into the window, headphones on. Leonard just sat there, hands folded, back straight, eyes closed. In his chest pocket, the envelope for Ellie's graduation pressed against his heart. It crinkled every time he breathed. He wasn't embarrassed, wasn't even surprised. This kind of thing. It happened more than people thought. The world moves fast, and sometimes people like him just get swept to the side. 2 rows back, Jillian kept glancing forward. Every few minutes she'd see him shift, just slightly, like his body was trying to shrink around the pain. She hadn't received a reply to her message. Didn't expect one. But she knew how these things worked. Internal messages climbed quickly when the right eyes saw them, and this one had. At 37,000 feet, an airline supervisor in Atlanta flagged the message as urgent. At 10:42 a.m., a copy was forwarded to Elliot Crane, president of Atlantic Skies Air, retired Air Force, 5 combat tours, still ironed his shirts with military precision. He was already en route to Charlotte for a speaking event. But when he saw the name Leonard Walker, his brow tightened. He recognized it, not from a database, from memory. Elliot Crane stared at the name on the screen. Leonard Walker. The plane was still in the air, but the decision was already made. Crane pulled out his phone and dialed a private extension. Get someone to Gate C11 at Columbia, Flight 408. I'll be there myself. The woman on the other end didn't question him. She recognized that tone. He sat back and exhaled slowly. Leonard Walker. It had been decades since he'd heard that name. The man saved 3 lives outside Pleiku in '69, pulled a corporal out of a collapsed trench, refused to evacuate until every man in his unit was accounted for. Crane wasn't in that unit, but his older brother was. And if it weren't for Leonard Walker, his brother wouldn't have made it home. Some names stick with you, even 50 years later. The flight began its descent. Leonard adjusted his jacket, trying to hide the grimace in his face. He didn't know anything had changed, didn't know someone was waiting at the gate. But Jillian saw it. The flight crew was whispering now, checking tablets, making calls. Something was coming. The plane rolled to a stop at Gate C11. Leonard didn't rush. He never did. He waited for the row ahead to clear, then stood slowly, gripping the headrest for support. Jillian watched him from 2 rows back, her phone still in her hand, but her eyes on him now. He limped toward the exit, still clutching the envelope in his jacket. He kept his eyes forward the whole time, until he stepped off the jet bridge. Waiting just past the gate, flanked by 2 airline managers, stood a tall man in a dark blue suit, silver hair, sharp shoes, a small, discreet pin on his lapel, Air Force wings. He stepped forward, extended his hand. "Staff Sergeant Walker?" he asked. Leonard froze, his brow furrowed. "Yes," he said quietly. "My name is Elliot Crane, president of Atlantic Skies. I wanted to meet you personally." Leonard didn't speak. Elliot's voice was steady, respectful. There was an error on board today, one that never should have happened. You paid for that seat. You needed that seat. And you should have been treated with the dignity you've earned. Leonard's lips parted slightly, unsure. Elliot continued. "I also wanted to thank you. My brother came home from Vietnam because of you. I've waited a long time to say that." The airport around them fell quiet. Even the crew behind Leonard stood still. Then Elliot reached into his coat and handed Leonard a small envelope. "Your flight has been fully refunded, but more importantly, you now fly as a guest of this airline. Anytime." Anywhere. Leonard looked down at the envelope, then up. He didn't smile. Not at first. But something in his eyes softened. A weight lifted. He nodded once. "Appreciated," he said simply. Jillian watched from a distance, her breath caught in her chest. For once, someone hadn't just seen a seat number. They'd seen a man. If this story moved you, tap the like button and share it. What part hit you the hardest? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. Because sometimes the smallest acts of respect leave the loudest echoes.